You are listening to a podcast of Agroforestry Business Model Innovation Network in Finland, a series of 3 podcast episodes on agroforestry business, produced in collaboration with Finnish Agroforestry Network, which brings together people interested in advancing agroforestry in Finland. I am Tanja Kähkönen, your podcast host today, the innovation broker in Agroforestry Business Model Innovation Network in Finland, and a junior researcher at European Forest Institute. In today's podcast, we are going to be speaking with Michel Den Herder about agroforestry and agroforestry business in Finland. Michel is an expert in agroforestry with over 10 years of experience in steering agroforestry coordination and support action and research and innovation projects in Finland and beyond at European Forest Institute. Welcome, Michel. Happy to have you with us here today and hear about your experiences.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me. And it's very nice to be here.
You have been advancing agroforestry for over a decade by now. Can you tell us about the time when you became interested in agroforestry?
Well, it started when I started studying biology at the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And at that time, when I just started studying, Frans Vera published a book which was about large grazers in the Ice Age or in the early Pleistocene, when large groups of grazers were still roaming the landscape of Europe. And in his PhD thesis, which was later published as a book, he claimed that the landscape of Europe looked totally different than nowadays. So we always think that forest is the natural vegetation, but he claimed in his thesis that it was more like an open landscape because these large grazers, they kept it open. So the landscape was a bit like the cork oak landscape, what you nowadays find in Portugal and Spain. We call them the montados and the hessas. Or it can also be a bit like a semi-open savanna landscape, what you find nowadays in sub-Saharan Africa. So that's a fascinating idea that large herbivores, they can have such a big influence on the European landscape and that they can totally modify and change it and create their own landscape. And then after my studies, I became so interested in herbivores and how they affect the vegetation. So I started studying moose and reindeer in boreal forests and also in subarctic landscapes in northern Finland. And there we used exclosure experiments to keep the reindeer out, and then we could compare what does the vegetation look like with and without reindeer. And also with moose, we did that in eastern Finland. And also there it turned out that these large grazers, they have a very big impact on Arctic and boreal landscape. And when I learned more about plant-animal interactions, I found out many fascinating facts. For example, like the plants are not the passive creatures what they look like, but they can actually actively defend themselves. So they can produce secondary plant compounds, and they are used, for example, when they are eaten by a herbivore, they start producing certain compounds that have a bad taste so that the herbivores stop eating them. So many of those secondary plant compounds, they are poisonous or bad tasting, but they can also have many useful functions. For example, salicine in willow, that's a secondary plant compound what we use in aspirin for example against headache. That's a very useful compound. And like tannins are a secondary plant compound, and they give the special taste to wine. And like that, there is many different kind of plant compounds what have a very useful function. And the nature, that's like a huge competition, a huge battle between different species, but species can also work together. They live like in a symbiosis. For example, mycorrhiza and plant roots, they work together so that plants can take up the nutrients. And that's how I also came interested in agroforestry, because in agroforestry, we try to make use of these positive interaction between plants and trees and plants and animals. So agroforestry is not a natural system, but it's a managed system. But also like in farming, you can make use of these beneficial interactions, and then you can create a system what is beneficial for the farmer. Like production can be increased like that, but it can also be more beneficial for the nature and the environment. So that's how I really came to my interest in agroforestry. So it's really a fascinating world.
This is super exciting. So could you tell us more about the activities and networks that you have been involved and what they have given to you on personal level?
So I'm doing research, but we're not only doing research. So it's important that the researcher also tells about the work, what they are doing, that you share what is the result of your research. So nowadays we're working a lot in these kind of knowledge networks. So we work with farmers, advisors, and also other researchers so that they come together and they know what they know about a certain topic. So that's very useful that all this knowledge that it is shared. Yeah, and a very important aspect of that is that quite often then we also organize things in a real life setting, for example, a field excursion or a farm visit. And there the farmers and also the advisors and researchers, they can see with their own eyes how a certain agroforestry practice or another agricultural practice, how it works in real life. Yeah, that's really interesting. And that also creates a lot of interesting discussions. And then you see that people start exchanging ideas, so that's really motivating. Yeah, so it's not only research, but it's also sharing your research results, and yeah, knowledge sharing is really important.
It sounds like a very active role as a researcher in collaboration with people and nature at the same time. I bet that there have been very interesting things taking place over the years. So how about any behind-the-scenes stories that nobody knows and that you would like to share with our listeners?
Well, maybe the most funny thing what happened behind the scenes was that when I just started my PhD, so I was doing field work in northern Lapland in Pallas-Ounas-Tunturi National Park. So I was studying reindeer and what kind of impact they have on small mammal populations. So I came there with my car and a big trailer full of small mammal traps to the experimental site to start the field work. I was really happy to start, and I was unloading my small mammal traps, and then a school bus came. So obviously they were on a school trip, and I was busy there, and the kids got out of the bus, and then they started running to my trailer, and they were standing around it and looking at all those vole traps, and you could see that they were thinking, what is this? And then the teacher came and he asked, what are you doing? And I said, yeah, I'm studying small mammals and reindeer in northern Lapland and effect on vegetation. And then he asked, could you explain a little bit about that? And I just came to Finland and I was just learning Finnish. But then in my best Finnish, then I tried to explain by showing them, yeah, this is a small mammal trap. It's a live trap. So the animals, they stay alive. You put food in there and twice a day you check the traps. Is there a mouse or a vole? And then you look at what kind of species it is and you take the weight. And then after many days on a row doing this, you can say something about the density or the population of small mammals in a certain area. And then you can also tell if the reindeer has a possible effect on small mammal populations. Yeah, so even though it was in bad Finnish, they accepted my explanation, and yeah, they said thank you. And after that, the school trip continued. They went hiking in the same area. So yeah, that was a very nice experience, and it also shows that as a researcher, you have a duty to tell what you are doing, and also that people are really interested in what research is doing, and that you should always be ready to tell about your research to other people.
This sounds a lot like you are doing a lot with the people and you are interested in sharing your knowledge with the wider network in Finland. And very valuable work with the children as well. I guess they were really excited to see a researcher in a forest with all these traps ready to go. Throughout the years, you have heard encouraging and discouraging views on agroforestry in Finland. How did you find the confidence keep going, knowing that agroforestry is a non-mainstream land management practice in Finland?
Well, that it's not a mainstream land management practice. Yeah, you can also see it as a positive thing in our work. So that means that we still have a lot of work to do. like in other European countries, they've been doing already like 30 years research on agroforestry. So they're already a bit ahead of us in Finland. But yeah, also here in Finland, there's many possibilities. Farming is really difficult nowadays because the costs are rising and it's hard for farmers to make a living. And many farmers quit. You see the number of farms in Finland is decreasing all the time. But yeah, at the same time, there is still many possibilities. There are many farms nowadays, they're getting more and more intensive and they focus on, maybe only one or two products. But there's many other possibilities and agroforestry offers that so that you can cultivate many different kind of products and combine them, but you can also add more value to your products, for example, through on-farm processing. So it's really interesting and motivating to show that to the farmers and farm advisors and also make other researchers aware of that. Yeah, just to show that there's other possibilities, that there is a future in farming and that together we can make it more sustainable and more environmental friendly and probably also more profitable.
This sounds super interesting, and it's nice to hear that you can make the best out of non-mainstream activity and find the new things there and how to advance it among the farmers and people. After being involved with so many agroforestry development activities, could you tell us about your most impactful finding related to agroforestry and agroforestry business in Finland?
What you see with agroforestry and agroforestry products is that quite many of these products are not sold in the supermarket or that they go to the normal supply chain, but that they are sold in another way. From our research, it now turns out that quite many of these agroforestry farms or farmers and cooperatives, they are like creating their own supply chain. So they create short supply chains. So the normal supply chains for the conventional agricultural products have a global supply chain. So these are really long. But in a short supply chain, it means, for example, that you sell directly to the consumer. And it can be done, for example, by bringing agricultural products directly to the doorsteps, or the consumer can come to your own farm. So you see many agroforestry farms, they have a farm shop where people can come and buy products what they like. Yeah, so that's very different. So that's quite striking that so many agroforestry farms do that. What you also see is that many of these farms, they spend a lot of effort in community engagement. So they have open days that people can come and see how the farming goes in practice. So that's very nice that children and their parents can see how food is grown. And that's also something very different from the normal conventional farms. They rarely invite people to come to have a look. But these agroforestry farms quite often organize an open day. So that's a very nice thing. And what you also see, this AF4EU project where we try to share knowledge, but there's many other networks like that. And we have also noticed that we're not the only ones. So quite many of these agroforestry farmers, they were already part of some kind of knowledge sharing network. So they talk with their neighbors or friend farmers and they share knowledge on specific practices. And yeah, like that, they help each other and they work together. So that's something very special.
It sounds that there is a lot going on that goes beyond what is conventional in agriculture and food production in general. The short value chains and community engagement and knowledge sharing sounds super exciting from the future of agroforestry in Finland. So how have these findings made you feel about the future of agroforestry in Finland?
Yeah, I find it very encouraging. We see a lot of problems in the agricultural sector nowadays, and it's very difficult to do farming, and many farms quit. But what we have seen so far is that most of our farmers, they don't give up. They keep on going, and they really believe in what they are doing. But another thing is that these farmers, they are also trying to find new ways how to do farming. So they're looking actively for solutions how to make their farming business profitable, and while they also at the same time would like to do something positive for the environment. Yeah, agroforestry can be part of that solution, so that's very encouraging. So what we have seen from the research is that agroforestry is mainly practiced in tropical countries and in the Mediterranean, but what we are doing now in the AF4EU project and also the previous projects is that there's also possibilities for agroforestry more in the north, so Finland, Sweden, and in the more northern and cold climates. So I see the future very bright for agroforestry.
This sounds very encouraging. To summarize what we have learned today, agroforestry has an important role in renewing agriculture and how we look at how food is produced and how the supply chains of food production are managed in society. At the same time, it has a role in tackling sustainability challenges and the possibilities that agroforestry has for creating business opportunities for farmers, forest owners, and entrepreneurs. So this all sounds very exciting for the future. And Michelle, with all your experience, what is the message that you want to leave to our listeners today?
Stay curious. If you have a problem, talk to your neighbor, your friend, or look for expert advice. Probably there is a solution and most people are willing to help. So if we work together, then we can make farming a sustainable business for everyone, for the farmers, but also for the environment.
This sounds very promising. Michelle, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you too. It was a pleasure being here.
To all our listeners, thank you for listening. We hope that you enjoyed this first episode, and if you did, please leave us a review. Please share this with others who may be interested in this topic. See you next time.